Welcome back to the Many Saints of Gabagool, with your not-so-humble and dickish host, JR. As it turns out, I need to shift gears once again, as my ability to coordinate things is much poorer than initially anticipated. I kept talking about how this would be the video where I would have a little bit of help from an associate, but a few factors have prevented that from coming completely to fruition right now. So, for the time being, I'm going to have to fill in the gaps. Once again, I'm tackling this one on my own, yet the subject of this video was a spur-of-the-moment idea. If you're a true and honest fan that has been following along with this channel in its early stages, you may remember in the previous interlude video, I mentioned having a games list, which I'm currently trudging through. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's just a list of between 30 to 40 games that I currently have figuratively collecting dust in my digital games collection. I have made a vow to myself to get through these games before getting into ones I don't own, preferably. I won't go over all the games I have on it and have completed since then in this video, but I would like to do a partial blow-by-blow of my experience with a particular game. If you haven't noticed by now, I'm talking about Dead Island. When I originally made this games list, I didn't include every single game I have, instead opting to include a majority of them, the ones I felt I would hold some sort of liking to. One of the games I had but didn't really want to put on the list was Dead Island. I don't mean to get too personal with it, but it ties into actually talking about this game and my experience in playing it. In short, the history and relationship I have with this game shifts around. Starting out, let's look at my teen years, roughly around 2014-2015. I had a friend who owned both the base game and Riptide on his PS3, but I only ever saw him play Riptide, for one reason or another. It's basically the base game, from what I can tell, with some additions, so it didn't skew my viewpoint too much. I watched him play through a vast majority of the game, but I never really played it myself, out of choice. I much preferred sitting down and playing the game myself, which eventually inspired me to buy the game myself on Steam. Now, I don't recall how I obtained the money to get the game, because I didn't have a job at the time, but this was definitely at a time when I didn't even have a PC that was capable of running the game. Needless to say, I didn't really give myself a chance to play it at the time. Fast forward a few years later, and I have a job at this point. Although I had money, I still didn't have enough to buy a proper gaming PC, mostly because I'm kinda shit at saving and better at impulse spending, which led to my purchase of a PS4. Amongst the games I bought, I ended up getting a bundle of the Dead Island games, which now gave me a chance to play through these games that I sorta forgot existed for some time until then. And indeed, I was on track to finishing the game, but for whatever reason, just stopped playing it. Why? Was it too hard? Normally whenever I stop playing a game for a long period of time, it's because it was too hard and therefore no longer fun for me. But even as I make this video, I can't concretely say why I stopped playing it that time. I usually have a reasoning, but I have none here, as I got about 2/3 through the game before I quit. After going through another game on my list, I decided to add Dead Island to that list, as I had started playing it once more. Putting my diatribe aside, what is Dead Island? It's a zombie-based first-person action RPG, with an open world and some survival elements, which one could infer from just by the fact that the game is called Dead Island, and the original cover art shows zombies, but anyway, it was released in early September 2011, with reviews looking decent for it upon release. While this game doesn't have the extensive, messy development that Condition Zero had, the lead up to the release of the game that year was slightly interesting. You may know what I'm talking about already, but I'll touch on that later. Time to get started. When you first boot up the game, the player is greeted by an intro video, showing the perspective of an unknown drunk guy, as you get a feel for what you're getting into. We're treated to visions of a party going on at some resort, and we catch glimpses of all 4 playable characters at one point or another. and immediately get the impression that something is off, as we also get some glimpses of some undead already having seated themselves into the party that's going on. It seems our alcoholic protagonist is causing too much havoc, being wasted and whatnot, so is told to go back to his room. Our intrepid drunkie reaches his room, takes some pills, and takes another swig of some nearby booze. He subsequently passes out, which fades into the title screen. I'm no expert, but I feel things are already looking pretty bleak. When starting up a new game, immediately we get to choose to be one of the 4 shown characters to play as through the game. I can't really say which one of these 4 characters are the best, but my personal preference is Sam B here, the Brute. He has the best health and specializes in blunt melee weapons, which comes in handy as you don't get much access to firearms until later. Melee weapons are your only way of survival for the time being. The game takes place on the island of Benoy, initially taking place in and around a resort. The actual story begins with your character waking up in a hotel room, with no sign of the drunkie we kept track of in the intro video. Here we are trying to get a sense of what's going on. The hotel is seemingly deserted and in a bit of a mess, so you gotta take a look around. After evading some of the living dead with the help of a mysterious voice and being rendered unconscious by another undead, you wake up once more inside a bungalow with some other surviving sane people. Once it's determined by the others that you're not one of the undead, you're tasked with fighting off some zombies outside the bungalow to save a surviving lifeguard by the name of Cinnamon. Yeah, we'll go with that. Once you're done with that, you report to Cinnamon here, and he tasks you with, Alright, let's ease down there for a moment and get something out of the way. This is yet another game where the story really doesn't matter. Now, as I've touched on before, having a weak or even absent story isn't at all a deterrent for me. I can deal with that, and I wouldn't even care with this game as the game showed me right away that the story doesn't matter too much, while not putting the most emphasis on it either. However, late into the game, it starts to give more of a shit about the story for some reason. Going back to what I was talking about earlier, this game got quite a bit of attention early on in 2011 for one big reason: the reveal trailer. If you aren't familiar with the subject, this trailer didn't show any gameplay but was a CG cinematic trailer, showing a family of 3 trying to hold out against some zombies in a hotel room. It shows the young daughter of the family being turned into a zombie and attacking her father, which results in her being thrown out the hotel window and dying. This trailer showcased an emotional story being told, which garnered much interest and showed much potential. However, even by the time a trailer showing off gameplay was released only months later, any mention of this bleak scene was nowhere to be seen, and such remained true when the game was released upon the world. To this day, over a decade later at the time of this video, the reveal trailer is known to gamers as one of the best game trailers ever made, and is actually said to be better than the game that we ended up with. I was under the assumption that the family in the trailer wasn't present at all, but no, they're in the game right at the beginning, if you take the correct path. See, here they are, sans the undead child, of course. I know I'm far from the first to talk about this, especially years later, but it's a notable topic to address for sure. I get what the developers Techland were going for in this case. They wanted to show something with some weight to it, compared to other zombie-related pieces of media that had been dominating the mainstream at the time. Thus, it was decided to hire another studio to construct a cinematic to convey this emotional weight. But, as history shows time and time again, studios releasing cinematic-only trailers for their hyped-up games normally means the developers are biting off more than they can chew. It wasn't for nothing, though. Getting back on track with my original talking point, the story to this game doesn't ultimately matter, but it starts to take itself more seriously by the time we get nearly 3/4 of the way through. Just almost trying to emulate the stakes that were established in the reveal trailer. Now, the game early on does establish that things are looking bleak, but doesn't lean on it hard enough until much later. This is not helped by the fact that the characters aren't really characters, so much as they are pure quest givers. While I'm not a fan of Deus Ex Human Revolution or Mankind Divided, at least the characters in those games felt like they had some connection to the player character, as if they're vaguely human. In Dead Island, most of these people aren't multi-dimensional layered characters or anything ever coming close to resembling such. They are straight, soulless NPCs with one purpose only: stand or sit around waiting to give the player or players another quest, or to trade items with. You don't know anything about any of them, not that I want to know anything, but even for the NPCs that are detrimental to progressing the story, there's no reason to get attached to them on any emotional level. The playable characters don't fare any better. Each of their respective backstories are dumped in voiceover form in the menu when selecting said character, not giving us much else. Later on in the game, you get some quest givers that become actual characters to the story, but it doesn't matter. This game suddenly cares about having a concrete story and pretends to have some impacts when it doesn't. So I've come across yet another game where the story didn't convince me it was the chosen one. Even putting aside the existence of the reveal trailer, I wasn't even exposed to the trailer and didn't know about it until after I started playing the game a while back. Despite my negativity towards the story, there's still some ground to cover with this game, like I said before. The story is no winner here, but the game does nail down one thing: the tone, the atmosphere. It was said that the grand reaction to the reveal trailer caused the developers to make changes to the game, particularly in the story, tone, and gameplay. While I don't get how that affected the story or gameplay exactly, they were right for using the tone. In the game, you get a sense of dread right off. Things feel bleak and kinda dark, while not helped by the fact that the game takes place on an island, bringing about feelings of isolation, and all these feelings never really faded. This game is co-op and can be played with 3 other people, kinda in the same vein as the Left 4 Dead games. Although I have few friends and almost none that want to play this game. This really sinks in the feelings of isolation for me, on top of every NPC hanging around, waiting to fulfill their programming, like the soulless AI bots they are. Because you can extensively explore the open world as much as you want, the environments further exemplify the tone of impending doom and abandonment. While I didn't think about it as I played, the environments were beautiful to look at, yet always felt like they were hiding something darker on the metaphorical horizon. The overall tone of this game is enough to make me not care about what the story does at all. I wish I could turn off this damn bloom though. Oh well. Here's the part that normally matters most to me. How does this damn game play? Once again, I'm a sucker for FPSs, although this game isn't strictly a shooter. Matter of fact, guns aren't really given purpose until around the halfway point of the game. While it's possible to obtain a gun while still in Act 1, ammo doesn't really pop up until well into Act 2, so you're left with playing the game with mostly melee weapons, which is fine. With that, the gameplay is both good and bad. The bad is mostly in the movement. It feels stiff and kinda clunky. I get what the goal was here, to make the movement seem a little more realistic and make the game a little more challenging. That sucks in general, along with sucking whenever you need to make more precise maneuvers. As you move forward through the game, you encounter more zombie types. It starts with walkers, your standard slow-moving zombies, and infected, the fast, hard-hitting, but weak zombies. Quickly, you also come across a big bastard, known as the Thug, who's slow-moving and telegraphs their attacks so hard that it's kinda like fighting an enemy from Doom at times. While they're not the toughest, they can get considerably annoying. Dodging their attacks at close range, which you'll have to do for most of the game due to the limited firearm access, is a dice roll. You can't really strafe, or at least you can't really move fast enough to always dodge, so expect to either get knocked down on your ass or maybe, getting lucky enough to dodge this dick's attacks. Whenever you get knocked over, it takes a few seconds to get back up, something that's not too bad on its own. But with how bad the maneuverability is in this game, you'll be seeing this animation a lot, not just from the thugs. Another big bastard, the ram, will knock you on your ass too, and like the name suggests, will normally ram you. Sidestepping his charges can work, but have a tendency not to. Usually jumping can help improve your chances of dodging, but it's still never guaranteed. Hell, walkers and infected can get you down too if you're out of stamina, because of course you have limited stamina in this game. The stamina in this game isn't the most atrocious one out there. Like, when it comes to sprinting, it's far and above better than the amount of stamina you get in, say, Alan Wake or Half-Life 2. It can still prove to be mildly crippling sometimes, such as swinging your weapon or jumping can help deplete that stamina bar too. At least this game is gracious enough to provide a bar. And different weapons have different stats, some of which require more force to swing around. For example, a crowbar takes a little more stamina to swing than a knife does, which can really fuck you up. Imagine being swarmed by the nimble infected into a corner, which will happen at one point or another, might I add. And your stamina bar is zeroing down as you hopelessly flail your weapon around like a fucking idiot. And the infected can hit hard enough to disorient your screen a little, which doesn't help when fighting an entire ass mob of them. Once you run out of stamina, it'll recharge after a few seconds, but in the meantime, all that can be done is limply swinging around your weapon, as if your arm was severely injured and doing this was a last resort. Kicking also takes up stamina, which is useful for maintaining a gap between you and the enemy, along with being able to throw your weapon from a distance. Both attacks can stun the enemies and help keep you in the game, although the movement still sucks. The movement mechanics in this game may suck, but the satisfaction of taking out zombies somehow never got old. Being able to bash a zombie's head off as they come running at you has a relaxing effect to it. It helps that this game has a layered system of enemy damage, being able to break bones and sever limbs without killing the enemy outright, but will cripple them, sometimes literally. This game also has slightly wonky ragdoll physics, and I gotta say here, I absolutely adore games with janky ragdoll physics. I personally love games like GTA 4 and Max Payne 2, well, for a multitude of reasons, for their representation of ragdoll physics, especially in GTA 4. Hell, the physics in Dead Island can sometimes work to your advantage, albeit it can be a little random. Whenever knocking enemies down, they ragdoll and can take a little bit of time to get back up. Sometimes, when knocking the enemy back hard enough, they'll collide into the environment hard enough to dismember limbs or straight up kill them, if they weren't dead already. The physics don't kick into full jankiness often, but it's amusing as hell when it does. Now, I mentioned this game is an RPG, which really becomes apparent in leveling up. Fortunately, this game doesn't stick a stat screen on you when beginning out. Instead, you get the standard skill trees, two of which all playable characters get to upgrade from, relating to combat and survival, while the third is reserved for your playable character's special ability. You have many chances to level up in this game to upgrade these skills, and your max health increases each time you level up. Pretty standard stuff, you'd say. With that, your melee weapons have a durability stat to them, requiring you to repair them whenever you want at any crafting station. Since crafting stations are plentiful and the only other thing needed to repair weapons is money, this mechanic was never much of a problem, at least for me. You do get a chance to upgrade most weapons, in a couple ways no less. Firstly, most weapons have a general upgrade category, which can increase the weapon's stats and make it better overall, arranged in levels from 1 to 4. The only thing required to upgrade these weapons is, once more, money, that being plentiful throughout. Another upgrade that can potentially be added to a weapon is a mod. These mods are sprinkled throughout as blueprints in various locations, and these mods add special attributes to weapons, such as giving a machete a chance to inflict electrical damage or giving a baseball bat the ability to have a jerry-rigged spinning saw blade that can cause additional bleeding damage. These mods do require supplies that can be found scattered in many places for the entire game. While these mods sound great on paper, these mods actually working in the field was a different story. Most times, these mods really only dealt a wee bit more damage than normal, and sometimes these mods did what they should. And they would only occur when landing a critical hit on an enemy, sometimes as well. It made using these for their intended effect a major crapshoot. Most times, you kill a zombie without ever dishing out modded damage. Other times, the effect kicks in just as the zombie is about to die anyway. Or consider this possibility. The effect actually works and one hit kills any fucker standing in your way. Or sweeps them off their feet for a minute. Guns can be modded too, but the same sentiment applies here too. It sucks that this system was so fickle because it wouldn't be an RPG if it didn't pull crap like this. Speaking of guns, you won't really find yourself getting into many firefights with this game. Like I had mentioned earlier, you don't really get a gun until later in the game. However, it should be noted, when you do get into firefights in this game, it's not that bad actually. It's not necessarily because the guns aren't too damaging, because that's kind of the case. Rather, it's because the human AI is so dog shit. You see, whatever AI the zombies have, it seems to work well, as I don't often see the cracks in their coding. Mostly, they seem to act like believable fictional zombies, and they don't have awful pathfinding. The only times you'll encounter hostile human NPCs is during firefights, those times showcasing that their aiming is goddamn awful. I died so much during the middle point of the game, normally to swarms of fucking infected, but before and after that point, I never died once to gunfire. I came close so many times, only because I was getting cocky staying out of cover, I had to actually try hard to die. And this is coming from someone who played the game with a controller and hates controller aiming in shooters. It was almost amazing how shit the human AI was, and I wasn't looking for that, nor do I remember encountering that in the past. I think I've covered the ground I needed to cover, and I'm about ready to finish this up. Let me highlight the story that earlier I dismissed as being shit, because it still is, but I'm gonna go over it. Act 1 of the game takes place at a major resort on Benoi, while helping numerous other survivors establish a safe house at a lifeguard tower. Your goals are gathering all manners of supplies, helping out other survivors dotted around the resort area, getting into contact with outside help, on top of finding the person behind the voice that helped you at the beginning in various points of the game. Act 2 has you break through to the city of Moresby, where you help a church full of survivors as well, doing the same sorts of things as before. Except the city is 100 times more rampant with the living dead, with the infected running up on you in groups to mob you to death, becoming way more commonplace. Because of this factor alone, my total number of deaths increased significantly, at least in comparison to the handful of times I died during Act 1. Before you know it, you're dumped into Act 3, which takes place mostly in the jungle of the island. This is the point in the game where it felt a little more disjointed, as far as the open world aspect goes, and ushered in the supposed importance of the events of the story. Undead encounters were reduced by a noticeable margin, and hostile human encounters rose a little, which meant that coming across the undead in general were sparse, even when roaming the desolate jungle for whole minutes. Less quest givers overall, which makes this act go by fast, even if you go for the side quests as well. Before long, you reach a laboratory in the middle of this jungle, run by scientists associated with a pharmaceutical company. They had been experimenting on a local tribe, which led to the creation of the very virus that has infected the island, stemming from some sort of virus these natives carry. While it is some shady shit, the scientists seem to possess a cure for this madness. In Act 2, we found out that the not-so-ominous voice belongs to a colonel who had originally been tasked with providing aid to the island following the outbreak. Through events that are elaborated upon in a separate half-assed short DLC, this colonel ended up at a prison just off the shore of Benoi trying to obtain the cure for his wife, which is what led him to the prison. And the brief final act of the game takes place at said prison. Act 4 has your character assisting surviving prisoners, while the voice urges against that and demands the cure. Eventually, the prisoners get overrun and all hell breaks loose, causing the colonel to render our main characters unconscious to obtain the cure from them. This colonel plans to escape by helicopter, where he has his wife with him. After a minor scuffle, the colonel's wife breaks free and bites the colonel, causing him to administer the cure on himself. As it turns out though, this cure is really an enhancer and makes this colonel into a mega buff fast undead beast. Once he is bested, the main characters escape the island by the previously mentioned chopper, relaxing after the hellish and wonky journey they've just endured. Then there's Riptide, but I won't be talking about that one here, mostly because I haven't played it properly myself. All I can recall is that it picks right up from where the base game left off, using the same 4 playable characters, along with another new one. It seems to be a proper expansion to the game, as opposed to the DLC I brought up already. Among the few DLCs released for the base game, one of them was a campaign following the colonel during the events of the base game. Gameplay-wise, there's nothing new here, but it fills in a few gaps when it comes to the story, but still doesn't consist of many noteworthy things, in typical DLC fashion. Then there's Dead Island 2, another entry in the series that gained quite a bit of attention too. Announced in 2014, the world was presented with a reveal trailer in the same vein as the first game, in that it is a CG cinematic with no actual gameplay shown. The big difference this time is this trailer is far more comedic in tone and shows a modern day California in chaos as zombies take over and survivors take down these undead bastards. While the footprint of the first game is ever present, the second installment has been stuck in development hell, which is almost never good. However, according to developers, within the last few weeks of the release of this very video, this game is still in active development and could possibly see a release in 2023. We're just gonna have to see how that pans out though. I don't know, maybe having a game contain the name Dead Island in it and making it take place in a whole ass state like California isn't the best of ideas. And that's it for this episode. Stay tuned next time for, well, at this point, with how things have gone, who fucking knows? As a final note, this game came out the same year as Human Revolution. I say this because I pointed out that the bloom was a little much in Dead Island at times, but at least it's not bathed in yellow gold. I know I've already talked enough shit about Human Revolution, but I gotta say here, if I really wanted to look at something that looked like it was drenched in piss, I would watch an old Chris Chan video.
This does not even deserve a captain's log introduction, because this is dead serious.